Welcome to the official Lakes International Comic Art Festival podcast. My name's Ian.
And my name's Nikki, bringing you the best in comics and graphic novels and updates from the festival.
Hello and welcome to Lakes International Comic Art Festival episode 38. Is it 38? Yes,
I don't know, you
38.
didn't even say podcast at the end of it.
Oh.
You completely fluffed that.
Whoops.
You can't do that.
No.
This is an important one.
Well, it's not.
Well, it could
is.
be.
It's always important, but it's not the one we wanted to record.
No.
We wanted to record a full festival podcast, but we ain't got time.
No. So you'll have to wait.
So the festival was a few days ago, and it's,
This is the time after the festival.
So next episode, we will have our thoughts.
Yes.
What we did.
Which was everything.
And loads of interviews. Right, let me just give you some of the interviews that are coming up. Right, are you ready?
Yeah.
No, I'm not ready. First, let's talk about this episode, because I've got that page up. This episode, we've got a panel from the festival, just gone. It's the best comic book movie ever.
In the world.
It features Joe Kelly,
Lovely
Robbie
man.
Morrison,
Lovely man.
and the potty-mouthed festival director Julie Tate.
Lovely woman.
The panel was hosted by Peter Kessler.
Lovely
and
man.
you'll hear them all talking about their favourite comic book movies.
Yes. Have we got to put an E on this episode? We have, haven't we?
Possibly, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But such is life. Next episode, as well as discussing the festival, we've got interviews with Steve Gregson and Matt Simmons from Bastard Galactica.
Lovely people.
Cora Brotherson talking about his books, The Magic of Myths.
He's like my new best friend.
Dave Cook and Killtopia.
Lovely book.
Jens,
Lovely man.
Jens K. Steve for Dunce.
That was a very interesting talk, wasn't
Yes.
it, with him? He listens to our podcast while skiing and seeing the Northern Lights.
Jealous. We've
Much.
got Robert Brown. We've got Simon Seymour Simpson, who's done Needleman, who listens to the podcast.
We love you.
And only knew of the festival because
Of the podcast.
So, yeah.
And he's the one that's written a blurb, isn't it?
Yes.
On the back of his
He's
book.
written
So
blurb.
I will read that out.
Exactly. A local Simon Richardson, who's done the Unity Wall.
Yes.
Lyndon White, who's just created
Finally
candles.
follows me on Twitter, so that's good.
My family Tristram.
Lovely.
On Draw the Line.
She is so nice.
Tom Nash, Tut and Groan.
Oh, he's like my dear. I bought him a birthday cake.
Anyway, yeah, she's a tart. And Owen Michael Johnson, who's done Real Love. Following that, the episode afterwards, we're going to have more interviews.
Wow.
With Guy Delisle.
He was so
He was
lovely.
Ben Dixon.
Yes.
Una.
Yes, she was lovely.
She
as
was.
well.
And John Wagner.
He was really great.
He was hilarious.
We looked up his table.
He's the funniest grumpy man ever, and he's actually
He's
lovely
brilliant. He's
to talk to.
lovely.
He is. He's great, he's John. So next two episodes are rammed full of content, but for this one, we'll say we've just got.
We've run out of
panel to
time.
play.
We want to give you something.
So quickly before we go on to that, the final Halloween comic is currently on Kickstarter. I've had a read of it. I'm bringing it up now on here.
Type faster.
Yes, I am. It's a one-off sort of comic that they're only releasing digitally, available from Kickstarter now. Obviously around because of a certain thing called Halloween.
No. Is it Halloween coming up? Does that mean I can put the Christmas decorations up?
No.
Oh.
Why?
Well, because if it's Halloween, it's near Christmas. Someone asked me if the frozen turkeys were actually.
What?
I know.
Hey, anyway, let's move on from there. So it's written and co-created by Mike Garley, who's done loads Samurai Slasher we've talked about, I believe, in the past, and artist Michael Lee Graham, with letters and logo design by Mike Stock. And it's just a one-off horror story, but it's done very stylized with the colours, the way it fits in the page. It's really nice looking, and it is £3.
So you've got English pounds.
Bargain.
Yeah.
So I will do a full proper review down the line of this, but I wanted to give a shout out because there's only 13 days to go.
And £3 of your English pounds isn't much, is it?
No.
Really? Because you can buy amazing comics for £3 of your English pounds.
You can,
Can't
just like
you?
Anxiety Me.
Did you like that? I was like, oh, what if I could just say about my
I
comic?
think maybe actually before we leave, we
dear.
should just talk about one final thing.
Okay.
So recently I performed my stand-up
You did?
show
Yes.
Live.
Live.
I say show. My 5-minute segment.
As I say, it was hardly a show, dear. It was like a brief moment in time.
The Lakes International Comedy Art Festival obviously did a couple of classes on comedy writing, which I took part in. And the end result was I wrote a 5-minute piece and stood in front of... Whilst a small crowd, it was in a small space, so it felt like a huge...
small a crowd.
Well, no, it was busy.
There was about 60 people in there, I'd reckon.
At the Fell Bar in Kendal.
Yes.
So before I talk about my experience, what did you think?
Of you? Oh, that's put me on the spot. Oh, you were amazing, dear. We didn't boo you at all. And I only had to pity laugh once. No, you were great.
So... Yeah, my comedy piece is all about teenage memories
of the 90s.
Of the 90s, and I suppose what teenagers go through these days. Even I'm sure
they do. Yes.
I got up. I was initially meant to be second in this crowded room. While I was waiting to go on, I had to go and stand up next to all these other comedians. Like, hello.
Yeah, and
hello.
they all knew each other as well.
They seem to, yeah.
Yeah, which is even more scary if you're
hello!
not of the in crowd.
One of them was Welsh. Hello!
Is that your Welsh accent?
Yeah.
Never do it again.
It's my first time. Ooh, it's his first time. Ooh.
That's what you want spread around as you pop your joking cherry.
Yeah. So I was eventually called up when they misspelt my name or mispronounced my name.
That's the best thing ever because you hate that so much.
Yes,
it's like
I think I need to do a discussion about that as well. And then you sort of stand there and you look around at everybody. They're all staring at you. Because
and also the lighting in there means that you can see everyone.
Yes, oh yeah.
It's not something where you can't see the people there, which is what you usually go on stage.
So they're all staring at me and it's like, right, okay. And I started talking and about 20 seconds in, it just went. My mind went blank.
I could only imagine what that felt like.
Dreadful.
It's bad enough for me watching you.
I don't know what I'm saying. But I seemed to hold it together, I think. Turned around, pulled out my paper.
You did.
Gave me my memory a little
jog. Yeah.
And went to it again.
You were fine then.
People laughed.
They laughed with you as well, not at you, which is the way you want it to be.
Yeah, people seemed to enjoy it. I actually felt buzzed in a big way. I enjoyed doing it.
Yeah, well, the buzz is amazing, I think. I mean, I would never... Well, because I would never... Well, it's got to be the same as I've performed on stage and things like that, as a part of a group, usually.
Yeah, it's getting up on your own is another thing altogether.
And that gives you a buzz. But yeah, I can quite imagine the fear factor and then the buzz when you do it.
It was like, yeah. So I'm going to do it again.
High. Good.
I'm going to do it again. I was meant to do it this past weekend.
Just because you like get free beer, it's great.
So I could have many beers as I wanted. Many as I wanted. So... Yeah, at some point, if we record it, I may play something on here.
Yeah, well, you see, I thought I was the one that put you off, you see, so I stopped recording. Because I thought it was me.
So in the future, yeah, we may record something. We'll see. I could always just record myself and then put canned laughter over the top of it.
Like they do in all the good sitcoms
American
on telly.
style. So yeah, that was it. So enjoy the panel. We'll be back next episode with a full, proper episode.
Yes.
Loads of interviews, loads of chat. And those who went to the festival.
Yes, we saw so many people.
We did.
So good.
We did. We'll be back on the Thirst?
The Thirst? When's the Thirst, Ian?
November.
What, is that like after the 30th? And it goes 30th,
I'm going
31st,
now.
Thirst.
Goodbye.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. You're feeling really bright.
No.
Sunday morning, 10:30. When better to have what we're going to do now, which is a heated debate.
Possibly a lukewarm debate.
Yeah. A vaguely inebriated debate. So the purpose of this discussion is to try and find out what is the greatest ever film based on a comic book. And obviously, it's very, very subjective. But in an attempt to reduce the subjective nature of that discussion, what we've done is we've united 3 of the world's greatest experts on comics and film. The funny thing is, some of these people have been introduced so many times over this weekend, it almost seems irrelevant to do so. But nevertheless, I'll quickly run through who we've got here. So, first of all, Joe Kelly. He is he's been introduced in various different ways over the weekend. Let me start off by saying, having met him for the first time, he's just an absolutely lovely man. He's
round of applause.
Thank you. You can just stop there. That's good. Thank you.
Yeah, I may as well stop there. But I'll very quickly say he's one of the busiest, most creative, most in-demand figures in the comics business. He's been the pen behind Deadpool, Spider-Man, Superman, JLA, Fantastic Four, and many others. Not only that, he is the only member of our panel today who has actually been responsible for a comic that has been turned into a movie. I think that's correct. Is it?
Yeah.
Sorry?
No, it's right now. I was going to pretend, but it's not going to work.
That is I Kill Giants, which he wrote with Ken Nimura, which made me cry uncontrollably. So thanks for that.
It balances out the nice guy part. I make people cry.
You might be interested to know his favourite film not adapted from a comic is The Fisher King, directed by Terry Gilliam. His favourite comics include the Batman story Venom. That's nothing to do with Spider-Man and Venom, you know. And Ode to Kirihito by Osamu Tezuka. Anybody read that? Very good.
Fancy pants.
He's the bloke you were just talking to.
You choose to told people on the porch.
That's right.
You might also be interested to know that at a comics festival, he once hosted a party that was gate-crashed by the Incredible Hulk himself, Lou Ferrigno. Joe Kelly. Now, Julie needs literally no introduction.
So don't bother.
Robbie, LICAF is her festival. She's the director of the whole thing. She is the glue that holds it together. She's the sticky, yucky mass at the heart of the whole thing.
Calm down.
No, she is in fact the charismatic bundle of energy that inspires everyone she meets. This is in fact the first time that Julie has ever taken part in one of her own events. Is that correct?
I think it might be.
Yep. And we may be about to find out why. Now, her favourite non-comic adapted films are Blade Runner and Monty Python's The Life of Brian. Her favourite comic, but when you told me, you said Life of Brian, which is of course not the title, it's The Life.
Such a pedant.
Points
It's
off.
going to be painful. Yeah.
Pedantry is important. Her favourite comics are Mouse and Viz. So very similar sort of genres. And her interesting and embarrassing experience from a festival is meeting the most talented people on earth year after year. Julie Tate. Now, Robbie Morrison, I think, would best be described as British comics royalty. Would that be fair? He's the creator of Nicolai Dante for 2000 AD. He has been a key writer on that comic for, well, I tried to do the arithmetic actually this morning. I've been a set for over 20 years.
Yeah,
is that fair?
Over 20 years. Yeah.
Writing many of their storylines. Sorry?
I started when I was 10.
Really? Sold your first story then? Very good. He's also written Doctor Who for Titan Comics, and he's even been a consultant for the Scottish Arts Council promoting the art of comics. Now, his favourite non-comic film is Billy Wilder's The Apartment. He's a man of taste. And his favourite comic is Asterix. It's a man after my own heart. Is there any particular Asterix book that stands out for you?
I probably still like Asterix and Britain as the...
I'd have to agree.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
And Cleopatra.
Right, so you like the 1965.
Well, the ones written by Goscinny are probably my favourite ones. After that, it's, you know, the
Absolutely.
artwork's still lovely, but it's not quite as...
But both of the ones you
Sharp
mentioned were
as it
written
was.
in 1965. So
Yeah,
there
yeah.
you go.
Well,
And now, once
You were
at
an
a
embryo.
festival,
just...
he got locked out of his hotel room naked. That's the sort of thing that happens, I think, probably at every comics festival. But I think the less said about that on a Sunday morning, the better. So let's just welcome Robbie Morrison. So, very briefly, the way this is going to work is as follows. Each of our experts has selected one film which they believe to be the greatest adaptation, and I'm going to give each of them a chance to make the case for that film. We'll then have a bit of a barney about it. I will hopefully invite you to make your own comments as well. And we'll kind of balloon debate it. So at some point, what we'll do is we'll get them to vote one film out. And then we'll have two finalists, and they'll kind of slug it out with some more arguments. And ultimately, we will choose the winning film. Does that sound fair? Yeah? Okay. So, I think the first one we're going to do is Joe. Okay, and Joe's film is Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Can we have the poster for that up? Right. So I'll just give you a quick background to it. So it released in 2010. It's based on Brian Lee O'Malley's Scott Pilgrim series of graphic novels, directed by Edgar Wright, who'd previously done Shaun of the Dead and went on to make Baby Driver, and of course another comic adaptation, Ant-Man. The film stars Michael Cera as Scott Pilgrim, who's a slacker musician who must battle the 7 evil ex-boyfriends of his newest girlfriend, Ramona. Despite getting great reviews when it came out and winning several awards from niche organisations like the Screen Awards, the film bombed at the box office, which is often a sign of greatness. So, Joe, it's certainly this film has certainly got an extremely individual, even comic book-ish sort of visual style. Mm-hmm. But why is it the greatest comic book movie adaptation of them all?
So,
and I'm ready to play clips if you want.
You bet. Thank you very much. So, there are so many excellent superhero films that when we were amongst ourselves talking about it, we're like, oh, why wouldn't we pick this? Why wouldn't we pick that? And that genre has obviously exploded over the last couple of years. But this film feels like a comic book film to me, which is somewhat different. Where Western is one kind of genre, but if you were going to do, I don't know, Blueberry, but you wanted it to feel like a comic film, it'd be different. And so the misstep version, with all respect to Ang Lee, who I love dearly as a director, would be the Hulk, where it was just like, hey, let's just throw panels on the screen and that'll be it. That's what makes it a comic book movie. I feel like Scott Pilgrim, because of Edgar Wright's style, he's so good at capturing the essence of what is it like to, the intimate relationship we have with reading a comic I get from this film. So, for example, when you look at the shots, almost universally throughout the movie, one thing happens per shot as if it were a panel. The framing is very similar to comic book framing, so just on a composition level. And then there's the rock and roll aspect of it. Comics for me are like rock and roll, especially indie comics. They can be messy. They don't have to have this super high sheen polish. And even though this is a beautiful looking film, it's kind of messy. It's rough around the edges. It's funny as hell. It reflects, I think, Brian's series. Brian was writing the end of the series as they were finishing the film. So they're tied inextricably. I mean, it's sort of like, I'll relate it to 2001, where Stanley Kubrick and not Isaac Asimov. Who wrote 2000?
Asimov.
Yeah. Clarke. Arthur Clarke.
Sorry.
They were writing together while it was happening. So Scott Pilgrim's like rock and roll 2001.
But is that what actually makes a great comic book just because it is closely related to the comic? Does that necessarily mean that it's a great movie?
Well, for me, it's so the adaptation. I think is the spirit is there, the story is there. It's a love letter certainly to the original comic. So that's true. Brian was involved in the process, worked closely with the writer, so that's great. But yeah, for me, it really is the feel. It's the feel of it. That the love that I get when I read those books, I feel comes through on the screen. I think that's the comic book movie of it, which is partly why I think it didn't do so well at the box office. Because in the same way that our comic book readership, certainly in America, is small but passionate, fans of this movie love it. I mean, deeply. But it didn't necessarily translate across to mainstream.
Do you mind if we just sort of broaden it out slightly, since you're here, and just to sort of say, having been through this experience yourself of having your own comic, your own graphic novel, turned into a movie, what are the stresses and strains for the original creator that you experienced during that process? I mean, do you feel as though you've got to lose things that you love from your original? You know, what did Brian go through? Sure. Would you have experienced something similar?
Yeah, well, I Kill Giants was unique in the way that, because if you've read the book, it doesn't give anything away if you haven't read the book or seen the movie to say it's about a girl who believes a giant is coming to her town and that she has to kill it. And there's her sort of real life and fantasy life and where they intersect. And for me, it's a magical realism story. Some people can interpret it as a fantasy story. There's a lot of ways to look at it. There are things that happen in a comic that we can get away with in a comic that would break a film, that you would be pulled out or you'd be told one way or another, this is real, this is fake. So by virtue of that, Anders was especially good at this, saying, we really have to cut this scene. I love the visual, but if you keep this in, we're going to know this is all in her head, which is not the intention. So that was more our take it and leave it. That was the biggest, with the widest brush where we had to do it. Then there were things for budget or little bits for time. I love the opening scene in the comic. It's not in the film. Little things. So now, and my piece was one graphic novel. Brian Lee O'Malley's was 6 volumes. That's a lot of work to compress down. But so I know that you always have to compress characters. You have to take this element, add it to that character. You move things around. But I think so long as there's a respectful relationship, which it seemed to be the case from everything I've read, it's not that painful because you do ultimately go, this is the comic, that's the film. I think it's the lesson I always call it the Alan Moore lesson. Like, he just goes like, well, the comic exists, so I don't care what happens to the film. I cared what happened to I Kill Giants because I wrote it. And I wrote the film as well and was closely involved with Anders. But the thing exists. So once the comic exists, whatever comes afterwards can be looked at as its own piece. So, so slightly different, but I think I could relate.
And do you want to illustrate some points?
Yeah, let's just look at this first clip, or a set of clips to just sort of give you a feel of how this movie captures, Brian's sense of humor, pacing, and just diving into the life of these slacker millennial Canadians.
So what's her name? Knives Chow. She's Chinese. Wicked. So when do we get to meet her?
Oh, please let it be soon.
That's for me.
Hi.
You promise to be good?
Of course I'll be good.
Seriously, please be good.
I'm writing another notepad.
Hey Knives, this is Steven Stills. He's the talent. Hey.
Want me to carry straight on?
Oh yeah, sure. Yes.
Okay, let's start with Launchpad McQuack. That's not the action time. From someone else, guess I'm dating a 17-year-old.
Oh, is he cute? Does this mean you have to stop sleeping together?
See another bed?
Yeah. You're totally my bitch forever.
So, I mean, those scenes are direct lifts from the comic, all the way down to the font that they use for every little caption box. I think it's that little bit where they go through the apartment is a perfect reimagining of those panels from the comic. The visualization of sound, all that stuff is hand-drawn. The use of the sound effects as visuals, I think, is a great little motif. The video game element, I think some people go to this movie and they go, oh, it's a video game movie. But that's in the comic. I mean, Brian O'Malley was obviously in love with manga and comics and video games and put them all together in this project. So all of that, I think, comes across, certainly in the film.
Okay, but now please, you two, dive in. And
I might change my mind. Can I change my mind?
Not yet.
I'll vote for you.
To be honest, I just wanted to ask, did Joe get a cameo in I Kill Giants? You were asking what, as a creator, what you would do. You want to make sure first? I'd be making sure I got a good cameo in there.
I'll tell you a very quick story about my cameo in I Kill Giants. So I'm in a scene that if you blink, you miss it. And I'm just in a wide shot. Ken and I are standing next to each other. But we were too nervous to sort of say to anybody, oh yeah, we should be on screen. This was so beautiful and important. But I was taking a picture because it was the first time that sort of all the ladies were together. And the assistant director said, hey, no pictures. Because I was just an extra as far as she knew. And I'm not supposed to do that. Oh, yeah, okay.
I hope you had them fired after that.
Well, so 10 minutes later, after the scene is over, she comes over and just punches me on the arm, as the Irish will, and she's like, "Why didn't you tell me you're the writer? I could have been fired." And all of a sudden, she was very lovely. We became actually really fast friends.
Top marks for the Irish accent.
That's my soft day 7. Usually I can do a little bit better. Kelly, it's in the name. But anyway, that's my little cameo.
Well, I've got a criticism, even if you two are too polite. So one thing I would say is, do you not feel that compressing 6 novels into one film as it is, it feels like a little bit of a mess? This film, it's got so much happening that it's too frantic.
Generally, I would agree with that. A lot of the DC animated films, I feel, suffer from that, where they're taking full stories and cramming them into 70 minutes. But because of Brian's style, and because it's almost like a manga, it's already decompressed to begin with. So the compression of it, for me, was a little less painful. But I do understand what you're saying. Now, Edgar Wright's style, which I love, and I think has been consistent from Spaced through Baby Driver, is this super kinetic style. So
it's always jam-packed with visual storytelling. Yeah. You're just getting old, Peter. Oh, noise effects. Oh, cut. Oh, no. Give me Billy Wilder back.
But even in that little breakfast table scene, just those quick shots of the eyes and just a glance with the little bling, like that to me is excellent storytelling that you would see in a comic. And then we have action, which comes next. It's, in case you haven't seen it, so you don't think it's all just kids talking around the table. There is some action. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I make one comment?
Yeah.
And is there a rule on language? Do we need to establish that?
Some of the clips we see, by the way.
It did say all ages in the catalogue, so I think perhaps one of the contestants will have to be disqualified.
That's assuming I show those clips.
Bear in mind that some of the films may include some rude words. Parents, be ready to
Does anyone
throw
have a
your
problem with that?
fingers over your children's ears. Also, I forgot to say at the start, by the way, we are deeply indebted to the Arts Council.
We are,
this event. Yes, what was your
question? No, it's a very, very small point. It's not a question, really, and I completely support and love Joe's arguments about the fact that it really appeals to comic fans, like real comic fans, people who know Scott Pilgrim absolutely love it. But for me, the aim of a comic book movie, The Greatest, is to try and do both, which I know is very difficult at the same time. So to engage with the masses, the people who don't necessarily read comics, and you invoke a kind of joy of comics, as well as appealing to those who are already into it. So it's a bit like whether you're masturbating indoors or outdoors, really.
And you're worried about the clips.
Can I make another call for a disqualification?
So you slightly lost me. Is it the comic book fans who masturbate indoors or outdoors?
Is which? Scott Pilgrim. It's masturbating in your own bedroom rather than sharing your masturbatory habits with people.
I thought that was cool.
I think I'm getting myself into a pickle already.
Well, also,
I know what I meant.
one of those you can be arrested for, too. Which I think...
Hang on. Masturbating with a pickle?
I surrender.
We need Steve McGarry now drawing this.
Anyway, moving on.
But it is a fair point, actually,
Sure.
isn't it? That, you might say that making a film which appeals so directly to comic book fans is not a particularly healthy thing for them or us. Shall we look at your next?
Well, yeah, absolutely. We should definitely. But just quickly on that, it's funny. It's one of the things that just to not to necessarily ply the audience or yourself, but it's what I love about being here. Is that while there's certainly mainstream creators and stuff here, there's plenty of independent stuff, and the market is so rich. And when we go to New York Comic Con or San Diego, there are people there that have seen a movie and have never picked up a comic.
Yeah.
And the translation, I wish the translation worked. I wish it went in the other direction. Because if that was the case, Avengers would sell 1 billion copies, right? So it is that I wish the club was bigger by yards, but since it's a small club, I like that there's some things that are for those people.
Okay. We're going to look at your next group of clips,
and
then we'll move on because we've given it quite a lot of time. But what are we looking out for here? Tell me.
I just lost my notes. Really, this is the this is the action portion. So it is in that way superhero-y, but I think you get the sense of the comedy that's used in the action here, homages to Batman 66, the use of, again, the hand-drawn visuals for sound effects to make it have the comic book feel. So, yeah, I think it speaks for itself.
As far as we can, I'll be your garbage man. I'm sick of your junk and your town. Mr. Pilgrim, it is I, Matthew Patel. Consider our fight begun. What did I do? What do I do? Why?
Watch out! It's that one guy.
Really went out with this guy?
Is the rest of the film like that? That's a bit. I think that's really well done. It's really good. I love the effects. That clip was enough for me though. It's just been too much.
They do mix it up, but there is a lot more fighting. There are 7 evil X's.
I'm going to stop it there because I want to move on. But, but I'm only trying to slightly play devil's advocate here.
Sure.
But I do think that the whole film does kind of go at that pace. And Edgar Wright doesn't always make films like that. You know, like Shaun of the Dead has moments of quiet and tenderness, punctuated by, great action comedy sequences. But nevertheless, that's some virtuoso filmmaking. So, all right.
Well, thank you, everybody, for indulging me in my little argument.
So now we're going to move on to Robbie. And Robbie has chosen really a classic one that you'll all be familiar with, and that is the 1991 classic, The Rocketeer. Before I introduce this film, can we just see a show of hands? How many people here have seen The Rocketeer? That is
pretty good.
That's
pretty
impressive.
good. That's impressive.
More than I was expecting, actually. I thought it was just me.
So for those who don't know, this is a Walt Disney production from 1991, but it's set in 1938, on the eve of World War II. And it tells the story of stunt pilot Cliff Secord, who stumbles on a rocket-powered jetpack that he uses to fly at enormous speed and with very little control. And his heroic deeds soon attract the attention of Howard Hughes, the FBI, the Nazis, and perhaps worst of all, Timothy Dalton. Now, it's based on the work of Dave Stevens, who originally created his Rocketeer comic as a homage to 1930s Saturday matinee movies. So, Robbie, this film is kind of based on a comic that was based on a film before that.
Yeah,
why is it the greatest of its kind?
Well, I'm not going to argue that anyway. I just think it's a hugely entertaining film. I almost went for I Kill Giants because as a short arse Scotsman, thematically it sounded quite good to me. And then I met Joe and it turned out he's actually a giant anyway. And of course professional jealousy was like, no, I'm not going to choose that. I almost chose Superman, but I thought it's just such an obvious choice. But when I was thinking Superman, then I thought, I'd rather, Superman's top dog, I'd rather go for the underdog, and I tried to think of a film that I thought was really entertaining, a beautiful adaptation of a comic book because it captures the spirit of the comic, the look of the comic, and I just thought The Rocketeer, it's like you'll believe a man can fly if he straps a big bloody rocket on his back and takes off into the ether. I forgot your question there, I just went off on a tangent there.
I just said, what's so good about it?
It's just hugely entertaining. I thought actually just listening to Peter's introduction where it says it's got FBI, it's got gangsters, it's got Nazis, it's got 1930s adventure.
And Timothy Dalton.
And Timothy Dalton basically playing Errol Flynn as a Nazi spy. It's hard to do I need to argue for it anymore? That just sounds like my perfect film.
Just following up Julie's earlier sort of quite academic point, is it true about Errol Flynn's penis?
That's where you were going with that.
I never saw it personally. However, I have read his autobiography.
Oh yes.
And which I would recommend to everybody, My Wicked, Wicked Ways. And I'm sure he censors himself in it, but God knows what the reality was like. No, I think it was a prosthetic one that he made, and he
attached apparently like an extended sausage skin.
Yeah, no, I did it. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to illustrate any of your points?
Let's go for the introductory clip just to show. This has got most of those elements in it.
All right.
And look at that poster.
Love the poster.
The lettering. It's just,
It is gorgeous.
Nazis.
Maybe not. Look. It's the Rocketeer.
Go again, kid.
It also has vaguely unconvincing special effects that in their day looked fantastic. They were state of the art. I don't know, I mean, does the contest not over?
Actually, I would like to say something about the special effects, and that's a very good example of them, is that this is a film made in 1991. Mm-hmm. Now, CGI really comes in 1993 with Jurassic Park. So this is at the sort of the apogee, if you like, of pre-CGI effects. They've gone beyond the Superman effect of making a man fly. That looks more convincing to me than a CGI depiction of a man flying. You look like you just shot into the air with a rocket pack. And I think that's one of the achievements of this film, is the special effects have got that grungy, realistic feel about them. You know they're not computer generated, and yet they are wild.
Yeah. I think what's really weird, it is done very cleverly, but it also, as a good film should be, it has a really nice balance of story, character, effects, and it all fits together to make. I mean, I watched it last week, and it's the first time I'd watched it in 20 odd years, and I thought, God, what if I put it on and it's absolutely awful? I'm just going to ruin my reputation of any kind here. And I watched it again, and it's like, yeah, the special effects are slightly dated only because they've become a hit so far, but the rest of the film stands together perfectly well, and I tend to think a lot of superhero movies, my problem with them is that the special effects take over. The third act is always, you're just watching a computer game instead of playing a computer game, and you just get bored with it. A little bit, the Scott Pilgrim, is kind of what I said, that Scott Pilgrim clip. I think it's fantastic filmmaking, but I couldn't sit through the entire film. It was a bit more of a bombardment. I just realised I probably revealed that I haven't watched it. I just think they get it right, and I think they were probably a little ahead of their time. I don't really know the reasons why it never became a big hit. I think it has charm, and it has a degree of innocence. It has romance, it has humour, it has action.
Yeah, I mean, maybe one of the reasons why it wasn't a big hit and why it hasn't become a sort of acknowledged classic is because it always plays within itself as a movie. By which I mean it's sort of like it's a really good story. It's really well put together. I don't have the feeling when I'm watching it that it's pushing any boundaries particularly. What do you think of that?
No, it isn't. It's an entertaining popcorn movie. It's perfect Sunday afternoon.
It's a homage to B movies.
Yeah,
and as such, it kind of remains a B movie.
Listen, some of the best movies are in. That's what B movie is for. Sometimes it
B is best.
The B movie.
Nicely done.
Yes.
Before I invite the other two to get involved, I think you need to support your argument with maybe one or two other selected moments. What would you like to show?
I'm going to, because I'm a romantic at heart, let's go for clip 3 followed by clip 4. My clips might be a little too long. This is just...
Well, we might pause at some point. Yeah. Okay. You've got to show the Nazi rocket man as well, though.
Oh yeah, no, definitely, yeah. Do that one first if you want.
Oh, okay. Do you want to just explain what this one's about?
This is when basically Cliff Secord, the hero of the story who becomes a rocketeer, he's basically got this rocket pack. He's got no money. His plane that was basically held together by chewing gum has been destroyed, so he's trying to. He finds this rocket pack and thinks, yeah, this is my ticket to this. This can get us a bit of money. It can win the heart of Jennifer Connelly, and who wouldn't want to win Jennifer Connelly's heart? And but then he suddenly realises he's completely in over his head, which is partly what I like about the film, is that he's not bulletproof. He's not a hero. He's literally as an ordinary guy with a jetpack.
He's not even a film star. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and but this is the moment where he learns, I'm in a fairly serious situation here. That world domination is the name of the game.
This is because the Nazis are after this invention.
And again, this is just a lovely piece of design, because what you're about to see is basically done in the style that they would have done this sort of animation in the 1930s.
And was Dave Stevens involved in this part or not?
My extensive research into it means no idea. He is credited as
It cost man's life to get this out of Germany.
What about Dave Stevens himself, the original creator?
Do you know he was American? I think he was originally a storyboard artist. I could be completely wrong here. I think he possibly worked on Raiders of the Lost Ark as a storyboard artist.
Yeah.
But if anybody wants to Google that, they'd probably find it's completely wrong. I don't really know enough. I do know he died a couple of years ago, which was obviously quite sad. And I always wish he had produced. He only produced about 5. Sorry, that's about 5 issues of The Rocketeer. I think there was little Win books.
That's right. The original book. I'm stretching over. I think about a 15-year period.
Oh yeah, so it's just a shame that he did. I think he was just extremely slow. And if you see his artwork, which I should have obviously probably.
But he was particularly obsessed with this era, with the 30s and 40s. In fact, he was particularly obsessed with one model.
Betty.
Was it Betty Grable or something like that?
Betty.
It's not someone I'd heard of before, but really, the Jenny character in The Rocketeer represents her.
Yeah, I think they're probably quite clever. Again, it's what I quite like the film. In the comics, Cliff's girlfriend is Betty Page.
That's it.
She was a sort of glamour model of the 1950s, and basically, I suspect it was probably Dave Stevens really fancied her and liked the drawing her, so she's in the comics. She's a glamour model who keeps getting caught in various stages of half undress so that they can get away. But they dispense with that in the film because it's set in Los Angeles, Hollywood in the 1930s. They changed the name from Betty Page to Jenny somebody or other in the film.
Jenny Gage.
Basically, I guess to avoid copyright issues and stuff. But they also make her an aspiring actress rather than as kind of glamour.
Yeah. Dave Stevens actually tracked down Betty Page as an old woman.
I think I remember that. Yeah,
befriended her.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
Stalking.
Yeah.
Perhaps. I'm sure it was all perfectly innocent.
Any quick comments on this from the other two?
No, I remember liking this film a lot, but I do feel for some reason and maybe just because it was Spielberg or because it was first, where Raiders of the Lost Ark like transcends that sense of nostalgia for me. This one does just live in nostalgia, and even though that is beautiful, like that animated sequence is so, it is chilling and it feels like like it's ripped from the newsreels. That appeals to again another clubhouse, which is for me a smaller clubhouse within our comics clubhouse. But other than that, it is a fine movie. I do like it.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary film for its time.
Yeah.
Before its time.
Okay, so everyone kind of likes it.
Yeah.
Everyone kind of likes it, but I can't say that it didn't change my life watching it. It didn't make me go, what the fuck? Okay.
What the pickle?
Well, let's very quickly look at the next one because we do want to leave time for some audience comments.
Oh, me.
So I've got to do the introduction. So, Julie has chosen Kick-Ass. Now, Kick-Ass, like Scott Pilgrim, was made in 2010. So 2010 is obviously the great year for comic book movies. But unlike Scott Pilgrim, it was actually a hit with audiences from day one. In fact, it knocked How to Train Your Dragon 1 off the top of the box office. So it tells the story of an ordinary teenager, Dave Lazowski, who sets out to fight crime as a superhero with no superpowers. And along the way, he gets caught up in a bigger fight involving organised crime, what you might call real superheroes, and the foul-mouthed 11-year-old assassin, Hit Girl. The film was controversial for its extreme violence, and even worse for some people, its gratuitous use of the C word, which is, of course, catchphrase.
Yes.
So, Julie, is this film just one long, dirty snigger? Or is it the greatest comic book adaptation ever?
Well, just before I start, if it's okay, I'd just like to offer some losers' prizes to Robbie and Joe.
So early. Such confidence.
Thinking that you can save it for later, take one from me, or you can drink it now to deaden the pain.
She's got several boxes.
Well, yeah, you have a
I
lot
have
of
actually. I'm
this
just
stuff.
trying to get rid of it. There's loads of it in my car. So I'll try and be brief because I realise I'm being squeezed. There isn't that much time left. I'm going to say a few things, and then I've got a few clips to romp through as well. But I mean, basically, and I guess it's an obvious argument or series of words to use. I think kick-ass.
Are you explaining it? Mr. Miller?
That's the sequel. That's the sequel. Kick-ass kicks the ass, basically, of all of the comic book movies for me. Ooh. It's epic, it's clever, and I suppose, most importantly, it's fun. I mean, I think Rocketeer is endearing. And I think Scott Pilgrim, it tries, but maybe it tries a little bit too hard. But Kick-Ass really does kick ass in every department. So I'm going to refer to these, so I want to make the points incisively, which is not my greatest attribute. But the book and the movie really do stand side by side and shoulder to shoulder. They were actually written concurrently, so although Joe makes some kind of quite weak argument, really, for the fact that Scott Pilgrim, writing-wise, was kind of inextricably linked, rather than at the end that coming together, this was really ingrained from the very start. And I think it's as good as the book, if not better. It exudes the joy of superhero comics. And it's very true, I think, to their genesis in spirit. And it's a true homage, and it's also original in its execution. It celebrates the geek or the nerd without being at all patronising or taking the piss, which I think is quite a feat. And rather than make all those points verbally, what I wanted to do was just quickly romp through a series of clips to illustrate my absolutely irresistible points.
But we won't have time for all 36.
Basically showing the whole movie. So the first scene sets the mood up for the rest of the movie. Play.
Number
clip
one.
Number one.
Yes, please.
I always wondered why nobody did it for me. I mean, all those comic books, movies, TV shows, you'd think that one eccentric loner would have made himself impossible. I mean, is everyday life really so exciting? Are schools and offices so thrilling that I'm the only one who ever fantasized about this? Come on, be honest with yourself. At some point in our lives, we all want to be a superhero.
That's not me, by the way. That's some Armenian guy with a history of mental health problems. Who am I? I'm Kick-Ass.
Brilliant.
Oh, yeah.
So it's just like the comic, you can identify, well I can, with the main character and his feelings about wanting to be extraordinary rather than ordinary. And the humour is set up from the very first clip. The second point is the homage to comics bit, really. I think it kind of encapsulates many of the morals of classic superhero comics in particular, but in a fun way and with a modern take. So play clip 6, which is the St. Crispin's moment, as I keep calling it, of superhero comics.
This one?
Yeah. Where's number 6?
Give it up, man. Just walk away. No, never. What the fuck is wrong with you, man? You'd rather die for some piece of shit that you don't even fucking know? And 3 assholes laying into one guy while everybody else watches? And you want to know what's wrong with me? Yeah, I'd rather die. So bring it on! You're fucking crazy, kid. What? Thank you. That fucking raw. Who are you? I'm Kick-Ass.
Oh, sorry. Getting carried away there. It's like Kenneth Branagh and Henry V. Pretentious
What, you
cow.
mean too small?
Yeah, with no chin. Anyway, and the second thing is referring back to Joe Kelly's point about making it feel like a comic, and the real comic homage is actually in the film. And so clip 8 is a comics interlude which describes the genesis of Mindy and Hit Girl, and I love it.
We might not play all of this one. But
okay, just a wee bit. And I'll move on.
Once upon a time, there were 2 super cops called Daddy and Marcus, who were very good at getting bad guys. Frank D'Amico was the baddest guy of them all, and he came up with a plan to get rid of Daddy. Being framed as a drug dealer was the worst possible thing that could have happened to Daddy. Prison was not his natural habitat.
Okay, thank you. The other thing that I think is amazing about this film is the juxtapositions, the playful, the violent, the inhumane and the humane, the cute and the menacing and the cheeky and the shocking. And I think through doing that, it kind of does really bring out the humanity. It reveals the sensitivities and the normality within all of this complete mayhem. And I think that really means that it kind of kicks into touch in so many ways some of the preconceptions of what standard superhero comics are about. So please play clip number 3. Just a bit of it.
Okay.
I never said Batman! Okay. Let me tell you the problem I got with that train. Our mole with the Russians tells things a little different. According to him, you sold my coke and you took the money. That's a fucking lie! I can't believe that you would believe this shit from a fucking Russian, man! Let me see, Trey. Hey, what's more likely, huh? That you're a greedy little cocksucker, or all my coke was stolen by Superman. Batman. I never said Batman! Enough! Now my son is waiting up there in the car to go to the movies. So I ain't gonna disappoint him. Joe, you're in charge.
Hey, that's gotta be the worst fucking excuse I ever heard, Trey.
We stop, but then he goes into the car and he starts planning.
Sorry, I had to work.
Yeah, starts planning what he's going to go and buy at the counter for his son when they go and watch the movie they're going to watch, which I think is brilliant. And then my favourite clip of all. So can we play a little bit of this? I know it's a bit long.
Yeah, I think if we don't vote out a movie, then you don't have to rush us.
Oh, okay.
Right? Couldn't we let the audience pick out of the 3?
So you want to miss out the balloon part?
If we cut our part, then you're not crunched.
All right, we'll discuss each of them, and then we'll choose the one from that.
Okay.
Yeah.
If that's okay with you guys, then you're not.
So how about this one? And maybe I should just pick one more because otherwise it's not fair because I'm taking all the time.
I only had 2 clips.
We can go back.
No, you don't care enough about yours.
Julie, what's your final point? And I'll decide if you can have a clip of it.
Okay, well, there's a clip 4, which is my favourite. So can you just show the very beginning of it? Oh, go on, please. And then I'll pick...
All right, there you go. It's the last one. Because...
Daddy, I'm scared.
Come on, Mindy, honey. Be a big girl now. There's nothing to be afraid of.
Is it gonna hurt bad?
Oh, child. Only for a second, sugar. A handgun bullet travels at more than 700 miles an hour. So at close range like this, the force is going to take you off your feet for sure, but it's really no more painful than a punch in the chest.
I can punch in the chest.
You're going to be fine, baby doll.
Love it. Okay.
I've got many more.
All right.
But I'll leave it there.
Okay, all right. I get that it's fun.
Yeah.
Okay. My main criticism of this film is it's a bit of a cheat.
In what sense?
In the sense that in the comic, when Dave tells his girlfriend, I can't remember her name, that he's actually kick-ass, she hits the roof and he doesn't get to sleep with her and she never looks at him again. In the film, it's like the key to, he can stop masturbating in his bedroom after that, because they're pogging non-stop. Okay? So it kind of claims to be champion of the nerds, but actually it's cheating. It's pretending the nerds can have something they can't ever really.
I can't argue with that. I know that would be the only negative if I was going to put forward a negative in the argument, is that it does twist that. And that's unfortunate, but then we know, unfortunately, compromises need to be made for movies.
Any points, guys?
I really like Kick-Ass. I think it's great. I think my problem with it is it spends the first 2 acts subverting everything that is about superhero comics and subverting them in a fun, interesting, clever way. And then in the third act, it sort of just becomes another superhero film where all the characters do, and they aren't characters who have any superpowers or any of that sort of stuff. I don't believe in the final act because they're all too invincible and super. And he even turns up in a
jetpack.
He
owes it all to the Rocketeer.
Yeah, definitely. In that case,
the
I
Rocketeer,
surrender.
this film is nothing.
I surrender.
And the thing is, in the Rocketeer, the jetpack makes sense. It works. It makes sense in that world. Him just turning up out of nowhere in a jetpack, and did he buy it in a catalogue? Now that's a funny quip.
Yeah.
But if you think about it,
bought it on eBay.
10 seconds.
They bought it on eBay from Dave Stevens.
If you think it in 10 seconds, it doesn't really make sense. That's where I just think the third act lets it down. Otherwise, if the third act had stood up to the first 2, then I think I'd have probably chosen a good point.
But if we're gonna argue on the basis of sustaining and consistency, then you guys are nowhere really. I mean, I think with Kick-Ass, I agree. I think it's quite interesting that when I was looking at the clips I've chosen, they're all from the first 2/3 of the film, and then the last bit does kind of go into a bit of stereotype. But I do think that as a piece, it's absolutely brilliant. And I think the other thing about it is that it was popular with everybody. So, including even The Guardian, they gave it 5 stars. Peter Bradshaw gave a superhero movie 5 stars.
He gave the first Fantastic Four movie 5 stars.
Also, Kick-Ass 2 was shit.
And my mum didn't like it.
Joe, any points?
I'm speechless.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that the third act does feel off for sure. Hit Girl is a really interesting character in the controversy as well as how fun it is to see on screen. But I always felt like, and I do enjoy Kick-Ass, I really do. But it's there's a lot of shock value for just shock value for me, which is certainly part of I think Mark's original story as well. Like if you were a real superhero, what would happen? You'd get your butt handed to you all the time, lots of broken bones and things like that. But in the way that people, some people love Deadpool, some people don't love the Deadpool film. I think that film exploded worldwide because it was just a breath of fresh air. We'll see whether or not it stands the test of time. Mm-hmm. This was shocking in like the first like ultra violent superhero movie, quote unquote. But then after that, if you strip away the ultra violence, then I don't think you really get the homage or the love. I do actually think in ways it makes fun of superheroes.
Oh, okay.
So,
ooh.
We're starting to run out of, maybe we could have 6 minutes. Because can we just turn the house lights up, do you think? Any comments from what I'm interested in is any comments about what you've seen and heard, but also, is there a film that should have been included that you really think we ought to consider? Any thoughts? Yes, sir.
I was just interested that all 3 films, if you like, are fairly obviously comic book. There's a lot of films that are from comics that you wouldn't know unless you have to know the source material, History of Violence, Ghost World,
Road to Perdition.
Road to Perdition. I was because that was my next choice.
I'm somewhat surprised that we've
Superman.
Sorry, that's just my thought.
Yeah,
interesting.
That is interesting.
I would have probably chosen the History of Violence, but I thought it was for all ages, family viewing. I would have chosen the History of Violence because, again, the History of Violence is a film. The third act is often first 2 acts are very close to the book, and the third act goes off into it becomes a different film, an entertaining film, but it becomes a very different film. I would have chosen it if it wasn't.
Robbie, I think you chose a better film personally. I think The History of Violence is slightly up its own arse.
No, I don't know. I like it.
Yeah. And then Road to Perdition was also my second choice.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Well, we could have joined forces.
Yeah. We'll show Road to Perdition.
Any other comments? Yes.
I think it's been touched on like quite a lot, but for me the most important thing about like for the greatest comic book movie ever would be that not only is it a great representation of the source material, but also it extends beyond the source material that it comes from. It creates something that, as has been mentioned, is not just for the people that are interested in the comic books. It allows people to be interested in it without reading the comic books. And also I think that's why it's important to talk about some films that people don't necessarily know come from comic books, because they really are people that do like comic books because they like a movie that's based on a comic book. So they are comic book fans, but they just don't know it necessarily.
So what would your choice be?
Oh, mine would be Batman Mask of the Phantasm.
Very obvious. Nicely done. Yeah. We were talking about this before. I mean, we were saying, the list, I think, is the first Superman film, without a doubt. I mean, that, again, might be dated, but it still holds up. And the first time I showed it to my daughter, and she's like, who's going to save Lois? I mean, my wife why are you crying? Like, she doesn't know Superman is going to save Lois. It's just like such an amazing, amazing thing. And then Dark Knight. I mean, Dark Knight's that's an incredible film. I mean, I on its own and as a Batman film, I think it works really well. So, and then that first Spider-Man, I waited my whole life to see that Sam Raimi Spider-Man. Yeah. I literally waited my entire life.
So I waited my entire life to see Gwen Stacy die on screen. And even though it wasn't in the best Spider-Man film, the depiction of it kind of went right into my soul. I'd like to find the answer to what the ultimate movie is two different ways. I want to find out what our panel think, but I'd also like to know what the audience think. So before we ask the audience, what I'd like to know is from you, bearing in mind that having heard what you've heard, you don't have to stick to your own choice. Okay? So, how should we do this? Why don't I say, if you now would like to vote for Scott Pilgrim, raise your hand. He's still Scott Pilgrim. If you now, I'll tell you what, you can even vote more than once. No, that doesn't make sense. If you now would like to vote for The Rocketeer, raise your hand.
This isn't going anywhere.
And what about, and are you still sticking with Kick-Ass?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Well, I like people of principle. Okay, in that case, we have to throw this to the audience. So we're going to have a show of hands. If you would like to vote, bear in mind, by the way, the winning movie will be shown this afternoon in its entirety. So, if you vote for Scott Pilgrim, raise your hand.
That's one. It's one. Oh, God.
13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Hands down, 20. If you want to vote for The Rocketeer, raise your hands.
That's everybody else.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. If you want to vote for Kick-Ass, raise your hands. Oh, it's a lot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Can we get
8, 9,
20
10,
points
11,
each for the
12,
younger generation?
13. Okay. Hands down.
Wait a minute. Some of you must have voted twice. There's not that many.
Right. If you've only voted for Scott Pilgrim because you've already seen Kick-Ass, and you would otherwise have voted for Kick-Ass, raise your hand. Nobody understood that question. Okay. All right,
I think they understood it perfectly.
Joe, it sounds like your knowledge and experience has carried the day.
Clearly.
And that the importance of respecting the source material has really risen above all other considerations. I can therefore announce the greatest comic book movie adaptation of all time is Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
No, I don't want to. Thank you.
I didn't hear that.
When are you going to do the what?
Souvenir.
Comic book adaptation of all time?
Should we do that next year?
Next year, you'll get your royalty.
Let's do it next year, and let's get the public to vote in advance. Let's get people to submit their ideas in advance. That'd be so cool. Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much,
there's a hand
everybody.
going up there.
Can we have a round of applause?
Thank you,
Round one more time. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening. Find out more about the festival at comicartfestival.com. Find out more about the show and how to contact us at comicartpodcast.uk. Find us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Music composed by Pop Noir.
This podcast is part of Britpod Scene, an independent network of uniquely British podcasts that's always growing. Check out BritpodScene.com or Britpod Scene on Twitter to find out more.